Hello everybody, I'm Matt Anderson. Welcome to Daily Elevation. Today's topic is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And this has always been my absolute favorite question. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And some people know the answer immediately, and some people are completely stumped by this question. And clearly I have no idea which version it is for you. One story I can share with you though is I still remember back in 1997 being asked this question over Christmas when I was talking to a friend of mine called Neil, and I immediately knew the answer. And I remember saying, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? I remember saying, well, I'd be a father, I'd have children. And I suppose, to be honest, the idea probably scared me greatly. And what's sad is that it was 14 years before it actually happened. And unfortunately, I had a major beast to conquer, I suppose, internally. And unfortunately, it was unwitting in terms of what was getting in my way around the obstacle to being in a committed relationship. I mean, that's what was going on. And I'm not embarrassed to share that I didn't know in my mind. I was unconsciously, not realizing that I'd had my heart broken when I was a teenager with a girl I was wildly in love with. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that had had such an impact on me that it had kept me at a distance, or it had made me keep a distance from people, from women, for the most part after that. And that even if I'd been in a relationship, I'd never fully committed myself. So my point, I don't know why I'm sharing all of this really, other than to give an example, but to really point number one is, when it comes to this topic, but usually the thing you fear is the thing you most need to do. And I just think that's a really profound point in this topic, that the thing that we're most afraid of is often the thing that we actually need to do something about. And so it might, so then you see, it just depends. So for you, if you're not sure on the answer, it's going to depend on what area of your life you're talking about. So in other words, it might be a health area. So for example, yesterday I was doing an event, and the person that I was talking to, not about this question, it was actually about, the question was, what must happen in the next 90 days? 3 things that must happen in the next 90 days was the topic. And he was honest with me, and he said, one of the things that I really need to do is lose some weight. So pick an area of your life. It could be health, it could be financial, it could be your professional life. Maybe you're miserable in your work. Maybe there's something you'd much rather be doing with your professional time. Maybe it's personal life, like it was for me back in 1997. And I needed, that was difficult. I mean, that required much more learning and going to workshops, and I suppose trying to address what was stopping me. But that's what it comes down to. I mean, initially, I suppose for me that would have been, I just needed at the time to get out there and date more, so I could at least get out there and get involved rather than just sit on the sidelines. And so, but as I said, it could be, so if you're stumped with this question, pick an area of your life. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail in your professional world? Or in your personal life, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Health-wise, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Pick something. I mean, and that's when people do many inspiring things, like bicycle from one end of a country to another, or they hike Mount Kilimanjaro, but they do something that's really physically challenging, or do an Ironman or a triathlon or a marathon. I mean, that's what drives people to do things like that, is sometimes just to prove something to themselves physically, but then of course it impacts them mentally. What I love about this question, among many things, there's a thing I love about this question, but one of them is that you only think of something that's possible for you. And that's what's so exciting about the question. So in other words, I'm 48. When I look at this question, I don't say, I wish I could, I want to run in the 100-meter sprint in the Olympics. Or, I don't pick something that's not possible. I want to sing in the Vienna Voice Choir. I want to be a sumo wrestler. I mean, I'm only going to think of something that is possible for me, and it's the same with you. And that doesn't mean, I spoke at an event last year in Dubai with an Australian chap who had lost both of his legs in a hiking accident. A rock had fallen on his legs and they'd both been amputated. But remarkably, when he thought of things he wanted to accomplish, I mean, he has hiked Mount Kilimanjaro without legs. He's done all kinds of absolutely astonishing things, and clearly he believed that they were still possible for him, and they were. So I suppose I'm only mentioning that and say to be careful about making physical limitations on yourself, because maybe you're wrong about some of those things. Maybe you're actually far more physically capable of doing something than you realize. So that one, I mean, make your own sensible step-by-step decisions on that. But the point is to get the juices flowing and to recognize, gosh, I could be shining more, I could be living a much bigger or more enjoyable life. And this is the place to start, is with this question. So what I most want you to take away from today is, well, really points 1 and point 3 is that usually the thing that we fear most is what we actually most need to do. And point number 3 is you're only going to come up with something that actually is very possible for you. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible. And that's what makes this exciting. So to wrap up, what lesson have you learned most from this conversation? And hopefully you're journaling about this topic as I talk, or maybe clicking pause and thinking about some answers, because again you might pick a different area of your life. You might pick your spiritual life, you might pick community, whichever area that might be. So what's the most important lesson I've learned from this topic so far? The NS is, what is my next step? What am I going to do next as a result of the thinking that I have gone through, processed on this? And I'm just looking at my own notes from when I answered this question most recently. What would I do next? And then the last one is, A, get someone to hold you accountable to follow up on that next step. That's really important and much more confronting. I admit it's much easier not to do that, but to keep it to yourself, and that way you're not letting anyone down if it doesn't happen. I understand that, but I urge you to ask someone that you would be embarrassed to not follow through on, and say, I've got one small request for you. Would you please ask me tomorrow, or ask me in 2 days, or ask me on Monday about whether I did this? And that would be really helpful to me. That will give me a little bit of extra outside nudging to make sure I get the ball rolling, because that first step is so important. So anyway, that's the topic today. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm Matt Anderson. This is Daily Elevation. Look forward to talking to you on a future presentation.